So now we'll begin the next talk of the day with Jennifer Homans. Please welcome me in saying hello.
So before I begin, I just want to use the mic. I will use the mic, but I'm going to talk just 1 second. 1 second. Because I'm just going to stop for a moment. So I'm going to talk today about dance. Now I'm going to go to the proscenium arch here and hide behind the proscenium arch so that I feel more comfortable. But the reason I did that is because that was done and now it's over and we'll never see that again. Not that we need to, but we'll never see that again and we can't retrieve it. It's gone. So I began my life, it feels like, as a dancer. And as a dancer, I came quickly to see dance as our first art and our first law. We're all born with bodies. We all learn how to move. And disciplining the body is how we learn to live in society. I was trained in many different kinds of dance, but primarily in classical ballet. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about at the moment. And as I experienced this, growing up and into my young adulthood, it seemed like I had entered a new society. And it was a ritualistic place, a practice, even as I came to see it, a kind of religion. I was trained by Russian émigrés in New York City in the 1970s. I was trained at George Balanchine's school, which had been established in the 1930s. And the Russians who trained me were émigrés from the war and the revolution. Most of them had fled in just after or just before the revolution, ended up in interwar Europe, and then come to the United States in the 1930s. My audition when I arrived at the school, and I'm telling you all this, we're going to get to judgment. My audition was in Russian, and it was just me in a room with 2 Russians who showed me what to do, and I did it. And it lasted about 4 minutes. And they called it then. They took my leg, they hiked it up, they pushed me to the back, they asked me how high I could jump, and that was it. I was in. That was the judgment. Now, the training was extremely strict and I always remember this Russian teacher standing next to me and saying, Jenny, to do, to turn the feet all the way, 180 degrees this way. And I, having studied the matter anatomically and having come from the University of Chicago background that I came from, was there to question and say, but I think it might be better if we did it this way. Why would we do it that way? And she just looked at me and took her little stick and prodded my feet open. And finally, I realized that the only way I was ever going to learn this art, which I was in awe of because of what I had seen on the stage, was to submit, was to completely surrender my critical judgment, my mind, my everything to what they were doing, and to just do what they said. So I did that. I really came to believe that you had to submit and you had to believe. You had to believe in what they were teaching. Then I came to see that all of this was instilled in us by, for example, the class was our daily ritual. Every morning we all gathered in a room. No one spoke except the teacher and the pianist. And we moved in rhythmic unity. And we practiced the same steps every day, over and over again. And we did this as a community, and we did it together. And we did it as a shared practice, but also a shared project. Now, what was the project? The project was available to us on the stage, and the project was transcendence. The idea was that you were going to move your body and achieve physically the loss of the physical into some kind of transcendent state, which wasn't going to happen every night, but was going to happen often enough to make it worth the pursuit. It was a kind of paradox of the physical and, call it what you will, the spiritual. And the physical had to be not just physical, but we were after the ends of the physical. Like, this was going to be the realer than real physical world, the world of the body pushed to its utmost extremes. How far could you push and go? And of course, we were young, so we didn't know what the consequences of that would be later. So what we were really doing was creating a whole world on stage. And when you get into a theater, you start to see how this happens, or I did. A theater is a place that has no windows. And so everything is made from the beginning. You have to light it, you have to inhabit it, you have to give it a certain life, and you have to create a whole world there within that theater that's different, that's realer than the real world outside the theater, that feels realer. So that's what the Balanchine project was, and that's kind of what I learned, was this extreme artifice of making the body anew and making a new kind of life that we could all live in, inside a dance. The thing about this life was that it was very short, because these dances took place every night, and then, just like our little quasi-demonstration, it dies. It dies right there on the stage the moment it ends. You won't see it again, you won't retrieve it, and it's over. Balanchine put it this way. He said, this music, these dancers, here and now. That's it. No past, no future. What are you waiting for? You might be dead tomorrow. So don't hold back. Give it press to the edge of the physical form. Press to the more. Can't you do more? And that was the whole ethic of what we grew up with. But it's also the thing that came later to make me see writing about dance as writing about ghosts, because it was something that was completely unretrievable. I couldn't pick it up later and say, oh, did I get that right? Let me look at that again. What did that paragraph say? What was that move that person made? What was that flash in the eye that I saw? Did I see that? Gets me in a lot of trouble with New Yorker fact checkers, I can guarantee you. So the idea of dance is that there's no text. And this is something that's quite obvious to dancers, but I'm just reminding us, many of you probably know this, but it's not written down anywhere. The dances even of George Balanchine, one of the great choreographers of our time and of perhaps of all time, are not written down anywhere. It's a purely oral and physical tradition. It's transmitted by the same way I was given my audition. Do this, okay. Everybody imitates. You imitate and you pass it literally one body to the next. The libraries are in the bodies of the dancers. They're not in books. They're not anywhere external. They're only in the bodies of the dancers. And so what that meant was that we really lived in what I now think of as the radical now. Radical because it had no compromise. You couldn't live anywhere else and do this art. You had to live now. And that's a pretty hard thing to do, because we're always looking back and forward and what if and let's plan. And this allowed none of that, because to go on the stage, you had to surrender to the radical now. You also had to live without words. And for me, coming from a very You know, I came from this University of Chicago academic family, and words were everywhere in my life. That's just the way the world was understood, as we all understand here, I think. And dance was at war with words. It was, as Balanchine put it, don't think, just dance. Well, that seems extreme. What he meant was, don't let the words get in your way. As one very senior dancer put it to me one time when I was standing on the edge of about to go on stage, and I was nervous. And she said, just don't let the words come in. Oh, okay, don't think about what you're going to have for dinner. If you're dancing and you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, you're gone. That's it. It won't work anymore. So the words could ruin a dance, and they got in the way of the dance. You don't ask a rose why. That's what Balanchine always said. You don't ask a rose why. It just is, it just exists. It exists now. You need your mind to be empty, you need to go out, and you need to submit. Once again, that idea of submission. There was no history, no past, no future, only the now. In a way, it was a utopian project, which I came to realize later. It was really that. When I became a historian, stopped dancing, went to school, did all the things that you have to do to become a historian, and then for the last 20 years, I've been a critic for the New Republic and for the New Yorker. I suddenly found myself on the other side of the footlights. Words, history, the past, these became my tools. So how was I going to use these things that had been denied in order to understand the thing that denied them? And that's pretty much what I've spent my life doing. And this applies not only to Balanchine, but to other forms of dance too, I believe, is figuring out really how to sort of train words onto dance. Of course, in the course of all that time, I've seen a lot. And as I have started to try to write about dance, I started to notice that there were more and more of these like ghosts coming into my mind. I would sit in the theater and I'd see all these ghosts, all the people who had done the dances that I was about to see before, all the people who had told me about what was new. And this chorus of ghosts was an impediment. So I found I had to banish them from the theater before I could really watch what I was doing. I had to submit. But as Albie was saying the other night, even when you are not thinking about all of the things that you know and learned and the people who have influenced you who are gone, there's this reason, there's passion, there's the dancers, the makers, all of that is at work, even and maybe especially when they're not being employed consciously. So as a way of sort of getting more precisely at this kind of murky business of judging, I thought I would talk with you today very specifically about Balanchine's ballet, Agon. It's one of the great dances in the Western canon. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but I'm going to show you the 5-minute pas de deux from the middle of the ballet. The score is by Stravinsky. It was first performed in 1957 and recognized at the time as an immediate, I think it was a kind of rite of spring moment. Everybody knew that night that they had been in the presence of something new and great. It's a ballet of 26 minutes long, 12 dancers, 4 men, 8 women, partially 12-tone score. It was abstract, that was the main thing. It was a dance about music and time. It was not about narrative, and it was not about plot. Balanchine liked to say when he was asked what it was about, he would say, it's about 26 minutes. He called it an IBM ballet, an electronic brain, a computer that thinks, a partial reference to the Cold War competition that was going on at the time in 1957 over the first early computers. There were no sets on the stage, just a clean, empty stage and a blue cyclone backdrop. The only set really was light, and lots of light, coming in from the sides, coming in up from the footlights. The dancers felt overwhelmed by the light, which is, after all, the only approximation theatrically of infinity that we have, really. One dancer later said it was like being on a high peak of a mountain or balancing on a platform suspended in light. And the critic, Edwin Denby, who was there, called it the acute edge of risk. There were no costumes, or you might say there were no tutus, no fancy costumes. The costumes were everyday performance gear, just a leotard, black leotard and tights. It was the closest thing that Balanchine could get to the nude figure, revealing the entire human form. The dance was frontal. It didn't care much about depth and perspective. It was like a flat painting surface. Or you might say like an icon, flat. No acting. The faces were flat too. No expression, blank faces. The movement was small, pedestrian, a reference to 17th century kinds of Baroque dance movements, which were also referenced in the score. So this sort of allusion to some other past time, but also a sort of flash forward to the idea that pedestrian movement, just walking on the street, is a form of dance. You'll see in the pas de deux that it's probably the most agonistic moment in the dance, it's a struggle. It's a struggle and it's a competition. The production that we're going to see, because I'm going to show it to you right now, and then we'll talk a little bit more, is a 1981 production, or actually I believe it's 1982, I think I have that wrong, with Heather Watts and Mel Tomlinson, New York City Ballet. And maybe we'll just take a look at that now. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, the bodies look a little strange, they're elongated, but. Okay, apologies for the very strange looking, they look like ghosts, don't they? They're so elongated. So this, of course, is its own kind of ghostly apparition because it's a film of a live dance. You may also be wondering why I didn't show you the 1957 version if I believe in this present moment, this radical now. Well, that's because there's only a very grainy old film of the 1957 production. Otherwise, it's gone. But I do want to tell you a little bit about it because, and we'll get to this one. The original dancers in this were Diana Adams and Arthur Mitchell. And they are not just the original dancers, they are the characters in this dance. And I just want to insist on that a dance is not, a choreography is not a set of steps that dancers can just slot into. A choreography is these dancers, this music, here, now, these dancers. And if you sub in different dancers, you've got basically a different dance because it's not just the physical form of the dancer that's chosen, it's the psychological, it's the intellectual, it's the sort of emotional character of those people. The whole person is being chosen to go in. Diana Adams was a woman of perfect classical proportions and sort of sculptural beauty, exterior, but psychologically very remote, kind of repressed, very troubled in her life. She was from the South and she had that sort of formality and distance. Her skin, as one of her partners put it, was cold as ice. And she was really known for her cold, cold exterior. And there was something rigid, a little bit fragile and breakable about her. And Balanchine struggled for years. He was so in love with her. And he wanted her to just move more, do more, come out, be who you are. And she wouldn't. And so finally he made a ballet that used that icy coldness, that detachment. And he found a way to give her her moment. Arthur Mitchell was kind of the opposite in a way. I mean, he was obviously black. He was from a Southern family as well, raised in Harlem. His father was a janitor who had been convicted of murder just a few years before this dance was made. He joined the New York City Ballet in 1956 and was the first principal dancer, black principal dancer in the company. Don't forget this ballet was made 1 year after Montgomery and less than 3 months after the riots in Little Rock. So the civil rights context of this is real because the unusual, even in the North, to see two dancers barely dressed, black and white, black on white, dancing together in very often erotic poses was quite something at the time. It was never, Balanchine didn't make a big, he just did it. He didn't say anything, he just did it. But it's this choosing of the dancers, of this particular psychosocial qualities that they had, and then of the relationship between them with their choreographer and with the music that creates the whole ballet, the whole thing of what it is at that moment. Is that it's a little bit, makes me think of actors and a director on a movie set, and you read about all the manipulations that are going on, and you makeup is going to make her mad and do this, so that she comes out and but all of that's going on. All of that's going on between them all. Then there's another factor which you wouldn't know unless you knew, right? Is that his then wife, a year before this ballet was made, who was a great dancer, and she was stricken with polio and crippled, and she never danced again. And he cared for her for the full year before this was made. So some of those movements where, I don't know if you noticed, he takes the foot and they guide the leg around. All this is coming from some of the therapeutic work that they were doing together, the caring, the love, the despair that came with that. So all of that was there. And then we're, several decades later, right, with this new set of dancers. Well, Balanchine's still there, so he basically just remakes all of that around two new dancers. Still a black dancer and a white dancer, but Heather Watts, you know, she's from California. Her father's an astrophysicist. Couldn't be more different. She's kind of a bad girl, rebellious 1960s kid, Warhol, anti-decorum, physically strange, as you saw, stranger than she really is, but strange, wiry, tensile, a kind of she had scoliosis, hair in a ponytail always. You know, that was the picture. Refused to wear a bra. You get the idea. Mel Tomlinson was from rural North Carolina. He was also from a very difficult and troubled background. His father had been incarcerated. He was raised by women. Soft-spoken, gentle person, physically tall, very elegant, looks almost regal, like some kind of a noble individual. But all of that sort of, everything in him very contained, the past, self-consciously, I talked to him about it, contained. He said we were all creatures. It didn't matter, we were all creatures. And Balanchine said to him, don't hold back, throw her, push her, she's tough, you won't break her. She's not like Diana Adams, she's really tough. And so this Parida became more athletic, more tensile, more intense, this kind of more Heatherish and Mellish than Diana-ish and Arthur-ish. So this dance really changes, and that's another thing that makes, you know, judging these dances difficult, because you can't judge one dancer by another. Why would you? That would be silly. And besides, I never saw Diana Adams, and I never saw Arthur Mitchell, except on this grainy film. So what about today? What about now that Balanchine is dead and gone for quite a long time? He died in 1983. They're still doing this work, and it looks completely different. Sure, you can recognize some steps, but a dance is not its steps. It's all of the other things that we've talked about. So today, how does it look? I mean, I can report to you that it looks mostly very conservative. It looks classical, it looks smooth, effortless, cool. Now, that acute edge of risk is definitely gone. There's not much emotion, no angst. It registers as kind of easy, distant, even pretty. So, I mean, I think the whole, everything's changed. These dancers today are more interested in perfection. They're more interested in stories than abstraction. They don't have a feel for it, so they have remade it in their own image, which is the only thing that could happen. And as a critic, I find I have to surrender to that and then ask those questions. Does it move me? The usual questions. Does it move me? Does it hold together structurally still? How does it work? How are they making it work? Is it good? Is it something we feel is important, that is it serious? Balanchine was dismissive of the whole thing. He said, once I'm gone, those aren't my ballets. I don't care who does what. If I'm going for a month, it's not my ballet. So if I'm going for a few years, definitely not my ballet. But he didn't stop them from doing them. So I mean, we can talk more about it. I don't want to talk too much longer because I don't think we have much time, but really what I feel is that with this old ballets, in other words, with the tradition that I came from, and it could apply to other traditions as well, the bottom has fallen out. And it's not something you can really rely on. And you have to treat it as something new, because that's what it is. It's something new and different, and it's being remade by dancers every day. And the way I've dealt with that critically, at least recently in the last years, is I've moved away from what I did. I mean, James was talking about, you know, his first line of that review, that devastating review. I think we all had those days, you know. But I was so sure in the beginning. I had these criteria, I had this tradition. It was alive. The people were there. You could apply it in many different ways. But now I see criticism less as an art of judgment, or I see judgment implicit in translation. So what I'm interested in doing is translating finding the ideas in the dance and translating them into words. And the way of doing that has to include a kind of judgment implicit in the reenactment of the dance in the writing that includes a judgment. So it's a little tricky, but that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm very aware that this idea of translation as judgment and as criticism is something that comes with the territory of dance, which has always got an element both of extreme joy and life, because dance is like that. It is physical, and it can have that extreme of joy and death. But it also comes with a sort of an umbrella of mourning, and that is part of the tradition. Is this ghostly specter-like tradition that must be approached through a lens of mourning, even if it's also a lens of life. So I can say more about the problems facing today, but I just wanted to end there, and thank you very much.
I have a question just to start off. Did you judge dance differently when you were a performer than later when you put the critic's hat on? And how did it change for you?
Yeah, I would say I did, because when you're a performer, at least in my experience, you believe in everything you're doing. So you think even the ballets that I then look at later and go, oh my God, that was a horrible piece of work. No, you think it's great. You want to make it great. You're involved in it. You're there. You believe. You have to submit. It's what you're doing now, and so I would just give myself over to it. Whereas later, sitting on the other side of the footlights, I could say, okay, maybe not so great. That didn't really work, or the mechanisms are faulted. So yeah, change.
No, I was thinking that the dancers are known for being, the cliche is that they're so strict and hard on themselves. Actually, as a dancer, the judgment would be devastating all the time, right? Because you could never achieve the perfection that you're supposed to aim for.
Yeah, that perfection thing is very, it's not the way I was brought into this, and it's not actually what I'm looking for in a performance, ever. In fact, I'm much more interested in things that are imperfect and that show their work a bit and show their humanity and their life, which is not perfect. Life is not perfect. Dance is not perfect. This you can look always to Balanchine for these things, but he's like, fall down, but do something interesting. And it's I always think of Lincoln Kirstein used to say, make your mark. And that's the thing you're looking for. You're looking for that trace, that spark, that's something human, and it has nothing to do with whether you're, you got to have some technique, whether it's Cunningham or Graham or another contemporary form or ballet, or you have to live within the restrictions of the limits, which are, after all, an invitation to freedom. Limits our freedom. But perfection, I think, dancers, sure, they're tough on themselves, but I don't think that's what they're looking for either.
Kostek.
Yeah, that was incredible. I'm very much under the impact of what you said and shown us. And trying to make sense of one concept you put forward. You said that you had to prevent the words from flowing when you are moving on stage. Now that you're a critic, you need to find the words to describe it. And you also said that dance is our first law, right? Laws don't make sense outside of words. So what I'm trying to understand is what law governs the people you've shown us on the screen. It's so incredibly complex what they do. And is it that regardless of what she said, they have the sequence, okay, after I do this, I do that, and I do this, and or is it a kind of body memory that dispenses with words? But how can you sustain that for about 26 minutes?
Yeah, or about 26 years. I mean, look, it's a grammar. It's a grammar, and it has a logic. And if you're talking about, most techniques have that. Most dance techniques, each one has its own kind of grammar. It's different in Indian classical dance than it is in ballet, right? The grammar of ballet is something that you learn, and then you depart from, the way you do from most grammars. Even when we speak, we don't speak correctly, we don't speak according to the laws, right? We go outside the laws, but we know where they are. So it's what are the laws that govern them? And are they words? No, you can have a physical life that, in a way, it's sort of, this may sound a little woo-woo or something, but if you think about how you live your life, most people, they go first with their body. I mean, I've noticed in my own life that big decisions happen, I just do it. And then I put the words, oh, well, I did that because of this or that, or, I did, yeah, and I give it, and then I think, how did I get there? Yes, I had all of those ideas in me, but in a way, it's Albi's bath moment. This is the moment that, and I find that actually for me, when I have the most words, I find the most words, paradoxically, when I'm sitting in a theater watching a dance. That generates words, or I go to or I start dancing, go to some class or something, and then I find the words. I can't find the words sitting at my desk. So your question is long and deep, but we can talk about it more, yeah.
Ben Zachariah.
I wonder if you could say something about the effectiveness of Rudolf von Laban's dance notation, because just like in music, we cannot reproduce a performance, but we have an approximation for the next person who tries to play it. Does that in some ways solve the problem of conveying a dance across generations or across different performances?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the question of notation is very complicated and long. But there have been many dance notations over history. If you even go just from the 18th century, there you have foyer, and you have several different dance notations in the sort of Western European world, and they all eventually fail because the movement ends up surpassing them.
Have you seen Laban's frame?
Yes, and so Laban is the most powerful now, I would say, probably, right? There's Benesh, there's several other contemporary forms, but the problem with them is that they take a couple of years to learn, and dancers don't learn them, and choreographers don't learn them. So it's not like music where you go to school and you learn how to write music. You don't learn that, and that may be a fault, but it is the way it is. And it's that way in contemporary dance and in classical dance. Balanchine tried to put his dances into notation, but then he found it was completely, he, as he's put it, I work on union time, and I don't have 2 hours to read this notation when I can just say tallest to shortest, line up, and I'm going to show you what to do. So it hasn't proved to be, in a way, practical. It's nothing to say that it's not a good tool. It just hasn't proved to be very practical.
Susan.
Thank you both for your talk and for that incredible pas de deux. Two questions. I'll try to keep them brief. One is, I once knew a ballet dancer of whom it was said, and I think he said it of himself, he started training too late to ever have all the technique that he needed, but he had such amazing stage presence that he still was able to make a career, if not an absolutely first-string career. Is it hopeless to try and define what stage presence is? That's question one. Question two, because it's clearly, and it's something, of course, that one notices not just in ballet, but in other things. Second question, you spoke very movingly about the two performances of the Agon, and you depicted how each was unique and each was very much dependent on who those four dancers were and their histories, but you made it sound as if you would have evaluated, to use James's terminology, both extremely well, just quite different. Whereas in your third description, it sounded to me like you were holding back on saying, but it wasn't as good as the first two. And I wondered if you were doing that, or, and if so, if there was a reason that you skipped the evaluative.
You mean the third being the
Contemporary
today?
one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so first, the first question, which is really a question about charisma in a way, right? And I don't know what other people experience or think, but I feel that charisma is something that's imminently recognizable. And you see it right away, and you know it when you see it, and most people agree on it. And you can say, okay, well, and this is like a very dance world thing, just as it is in theater and in film as well. Anything that's got a performing arts aspect to it. Oh, that one is amazing, and everybody looks, and then yes, anointed, right? That one, but it's true, and it's completely impossible to say where that comes from, I think. I mean, again, Balanchine, right? I can teach you how to dance. I can't teach you how to make me watch you, how to make me look at you, Mm-hmm. And it's not the one who's perfect, often. It's the one who's not perfect and who has all of this interesting stuff going on that makes it very deep and very kind of jagged often, but not always, sometimes smooth, but you know it when you see it. The question of the evaluation of the third, yes, I mean, I suppose, I do believe that these dances are mainly dead now. And I say that with hesitation because I love them, and I don't want them to be dead. And I'm always open. I mean, there's a great moment between Twyla Tharp and Jerome Robbins where she's got a new ballet going up, and he's sort of trying to help her out, and she's so nervous, she can barely, and he says, don't worry, they want to like it. Mm-hmm. And I feel that way when I'm in the theater. I go and I want to like it, and I really do submit and put those ghosts, banish them, and try to watch and it depends on the night. It just depends on the night. So, you can keep going, but it is true that those dances don't have the volume that they once had. And why should they? Those people are gone. It's not the same thing. It's not bad. It's just different. And so that's why, I think, I used this example because it sort of shows both the fragility and the power of the tradition. Merce Cunningham, for example, just disbanded his company, and you can see some of the dances today, but he didn't allow this kind of 30 years later, everybody's still doing it. It's more, recognition of of the nowness, of the radical now. And so, yeah, I'm a skeptic, I suppose, but I'm open, because you never know. You just never know where it's going to come from in dance, when that charisma is going to show up, when someone's going to tweak it in a way that makes it into something vital and new.
Uli.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So I wanted to stay with the contradiction or productive tension you mentioned in the beginning when you say dance is trying to transcend the limitations of the body and the laws of gravity. And in your book, Mr. B, you say when these dancers were trained to really the hilt, the max, and then when they went on stage, they were totally free. They experienced total freedom on stage. Before that, there was just structure training all the time, demand, 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 and then they were free to be who they were. And this tension seems to be what the critic is trying to capture, a kind of transcendence that leads to radical immanence, that we are in the presence of a moment that feels more alive than life itself, that is impregnated with some kind of sacral or sort of importance. And the critic is trying to capture that. Thomas mentioned the idea of wonder in the beginning. You try to capture wonder and actually not explain it away and run away from it through explanation. And so Emily Dickinson defines wonder in 3 negatives. She says, wonder is not precisely knowing and not precisely knowing not. A beautiful but bleak condition. He has not lived who has not felt. It's bleak because we'll never capture it. It's beautiful because it's life itself. And if you haven't felt wonder, you haven't been alive. You're dead to life. But the critic, you're trying to capture that, and in your writing, and I love your writing because you are trying to capture an experience that is ephemeral, that won't appear again, and in reading a sentence you say, oh, I felt what Jenny felt. And it's very specific and very precise, and it's an immanence that is achieved by all this training, all this rigor, and this is, it's not a contradiction, but it's a really powerful kind of tension to go from transcending the limits and what, Justice Sachs said yesterday, the law actually is here to give us maximal freedom. Laws are there to give us as much freedom as we can, a total contradiction. They're not here to restrict us, they're enabled to empower us, and he said the Constitution is not self-enforcing, it is actually to be lived and filled with life. And that seems to be the critic's work, to fill again us with an experience of wonder which is inexpressible, ephemeral. And I really think you're one of the great people to be able to do this, and always failing. In the best possible way, exactly. Because it's bleak, because we can't capture that. So I think what you're trying to do is to sort of identify this moment of speechlessness, and I think it's really interesting to connect that moment of speechlessness to a kind of radical sense of freedom that we can achieve as humans. That you see these two people achieving something that, and you said in this context, 57, 69, wasn't possible for many people, and yet it was because it's right there. So when you look at history, you say, oh, 57, Little Rock, Montgomery, so difficult. No, it's right there. It's right there. They lived that moment for us. And in some ways, that is to be held on to, that art gives us that, which from the law wasn't possible, politically wasn't, supposedly it wasn't possible to read history books, right? And there it is, right there, live in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you, Uli. That's those very kind things you said. I guess from what you said, one thing I could just comment on is this idea of wonder, which I think is very, it's sort of the fundamental, the marvelous or the merveilleux in the French context. I mean, this is the origins actually of classical ballet, that's the 17th century origins that they were referring to, right? Which is that this is an art form that comes out of that, or out of sort of magic and astrology and the irrational, and then there's the technique, which is pure reason, right? Which is like, as somebody put it to me once, like learning Greek, or you have to really apply yourself to these laws and to here's the law, right? Here's the words, here's the things that you must obey and must do, or at least that are advised, right? Turn out that much. Well, maybe, but I think the idea of the limits and the freedom is real, and that is the great achievement in my mind of Balanchine's art, is that he created dances that had a certain kind of you know, everything was fungible. When the curtain went up, the dancers were in a very highly, and we haven't talked about this because wasn't really our subject, but a musical and dance score that are integrated and they're in gear with each other. But within that, it's up to the dancers to make that evident and to make that work. And to do that, they have to have freedom to be late or on time or here, there, or, you know, there's so many different things that can change the character of the performance in the psychophysical, mathematical being of the dancer herself. So it has to sort of, the wonder happens in the moment, but it's the result. And again, thank you, Albie Sachs, you know, it's that everything is coming into play, all of that work, but then there's a product that shows the work but isn't necessarily giving you all of the detail of the process behind it. You can't have it without that work, but the freedom is real, even if it's governed by the rules of the work.
Once again, Kristen Gotze, you have the last question. Okay.
So I have a question that is going to appeal to the historian in you. In anthropology, we have a concept called schismogenesis, whereby two cultures side by side diverge and create things in opposition to each other. And I'm very curious about the role of the Cold War. And you talked about your Russian training and some of these moments in 57 and 82, right? They're very much inflected by soft competition between these superpowers. How does this sort of schismogenesis of the Soviet Union versus the United States, for instance, affect dance and the judgment of dance and the judgment of transcendence?
Well, that's such a big question. What a great question. You know, I mean, maybe I can just say briefly that I do think that it probably would not, Balanchine's life and work probably would not have happened without the Cold War. I mean, it's intimately entwined with the politics of, I mean, just even if you look in the most simple way, between socialist realism, which was in ballet as well, very much so. You know, it has to tell a story. It's got to be, you got to be able to send it to the censors. If you can't, it's probably about sex, and we're not going to have it. And I mean, these are characters, right? Caricatures, but. And then Balanchine's insistence on abstraction, which was not really a sort of copycat, abstract expressionist kind of response. It was really, it was his own formation, but it was also, as you said, in opposition. And believe me, Agon went to the USSR when the company went there in 1962. That was the one thing he would not leave behind, because that was what was going to show them what it was. And they said, oh, it's about slavery. The man is on the floor, the woman is up top, you know, and it's a white woman, a black man. And he was like, no, it's about 26 minutes. So there, you know, this kind of, and the IBM computer, the machine that thinks at the same moment as the expositions that are, so, and a lot of the money that funded the New York City Ballet came from State Department tours and from Ford Foundation money that was basically fighting the Cold War on American soil. So that was, I mean, and certainly as a Russian immigrant, he was not a white Russian, but as a Russian immigrant who was deeply anti-communist. This was very much his project. It's really a sort of counter-enlightenment project of religion and art against the loss of God. And I mean, this gets into, I mean, he was a devout Russian Orthodox mystic in a way. He was a mystic. So all of that is very deeply in play here. So you're certainly right to signal it.
Well, let's thank Jennifer Homans for the talk.
Thank you.